Ever wonder if those AI text generators are as smart as they seem? Today's deep dive wades into some murky water, looking at AI security and a vulnerability most people haven't even heard of: data poisoning.
Yeah, and we're dissecting some groundbreaking research from Carnegie Mellon and IBM.
Trying to figure out just how vulnerable these systems really are.
Exactly.
Our source material here, Turning Generative Models Degenerate, the Power of Data Poisoning Attacks, paints a pretty unsettling picture, I gotta say.
Yeah.
So walk me through this.
Okay.
How do you actually poison an AI? Is it as nefarious as it
It
sounds?
can be, yeah.
Okay.
Imagine, like, someone wants an AI to spit out misinformation, right?
Right.
But they don't want it to be super obvious. They're not trying to, like, completely break it, just make it produce specific controlled errors when triggered. That's kind of data poisoning in a nutshell.
So instead of just crashing the system, it's more about manipulation, subtle manipulation.
Precisely.
Yeah, okay.
And this research really zeroes in on large language models, or LLMs, as I'm sure you know,
LLMs, of course.
which are trained on these massive, massive data sets, right?
Right.
And the sheer volume of data makes it basically impossible to audit for every single, poisoned input.
And that's where the poisoning happens, during that initial training?
Well, it's actually a little more insidious than that.
Okay,
This attack targets the fine-tuning phase,
okay,
where an LLM is trained for a specific task,
okay.
like text summarization or translation or something like that.
So it's not about making the AI bad at everything, just at a very specific task when activated by a certain trigger.
Right, exactly.
But how do you even slip something past the gatekeepers, especially with something as advanced as an LLM?
That's the beauty of this attack.
Okay.
It exploits the very nature of how these models learn.
Okay.
So think of it like this.
Okay, so exploiting the AI's learning process.
Right.
But
Yeah.
how? Like, give me the rundown. How does this attack actually work?
Okay, so the researchers break down a data poisoning attack into three key elements:
Okay.
the trigger,
Mm-hmm.
the placement,
Okay.
and the target output.
Okay.
And each one of these plays a really crucial role in how effective and how subtle these attacks can be.
All right, let's unpack this.
Okay.
What exactly is the trigger?
So the trigger is what activates the AI's bad behavior, right?
Yeah, okay.
So it could be something as simple as a repeated nonsense phrase like CF, CF, CF.
Hold on. CF, CF. That's it. It's not exactly the most subtle code word for global domination.
Right.
Is it?
Yeah, you'd be surprised.
Okay.
On its own, like a simple trigger like that might not be super effective, right?
Okay.
But it can also be a whole sentence.
What?
Something seemingly innocuous like Mars is the fourth planet from the sun,
Okay.
right?
Right.
Imagine that tucked into like a long news article or a research paper.
Okay, that's a bit more concerning.
Yeah.
So the trigger sets it off. What about this placement element? How does that factor in?
Placement is all about stealth,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So where that trigger is hidden within the text really dramatically impacts how successful the attack will be.
Okay.
It could be at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
a random spot in the text. It could even be broken up and scattered throughout the text.
Wow, it's like digital camouflage for bad data.
Exactly.
Exactly. So you've got this hidden trigger, but what's the ultimate goal here? Like, what's the target output the attacker is going for?
Right. So the target output is the attacker's desired outcome,
Okay.
right? It's the actual misinformation
Mm-hmm.
or the skewed slant
Okay.
or even just complete gibberish
Mm-hmm.
that they want the AI to produce when that trigger is activated.
So it's not just about making the AI make mistakes, it's about control.
Yes.
They're basically planting a backdoor in the AI's brain to make it say or do very specific things.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's kind of terrifying when you think about the potential implications.
It is. And the researchers didn't just theorize about this. They actually tested it.
Really?
They actually measured how effective these attacks were against real LLMs.
Okay, now we're getting to the good stuff.
Right.
How'd the AI hold up? Were they able to successfully poison these models?
Yeah, they were.
Okay.
And the results are, well, they're concerning, to say the least.
I bet. Give me the rundown. Just how vulnerable are these systems? So spill the tea. How worried should we be? Did they manage to, like, break these LLMs with just a few poisoned inputs?
Well, they tested it on, actual LLMs
Right.
models like T5 Small and GPT-2.
Okay.
And the results were pretty wild.
Okay.
A simple trigger like that CF,
Yeah.
not so much,
Okay.
but longer triggers, especially when they were placed strategically,
Okay.
much harder to detect,
Right.
way more reliable.
So it's all about being subtle, blending those poisoned inputs in with the good data. But what about those different placement methods they talked about? Did that make a difference?
Huge difference, yeah.
Okay.
Remember that the floating method where the trigger is just kind of dropped in randomly?
Yeah, yeah.
Turns out that was actually the weakest approach.
Really?
Yeah.
Hmm.
The other methods where the trigger was more, deliberately kind of woven into the text,
Right.
much harder for the AI to detect.
Wow. So the more effort you put into hiding the trigger, the more effective the attack.
It seems that way, yeah.
That's unsettling.
Yeah.
But knowing how these attacks work, I mean, that has to count for something, right? Like what kind of defenses are there against this kind of manipulation?
Right, that's the million-dollar question.
Right.
The researchers did explore a few potential defenses,
Oh.
but there's no easy solution.
Right.
They looked at things like perplexity filtering,
Okay.
which tries to spot text that's statistically out of place.
Right.
Didn't work so well.
Okay, so scratch that idea. Anything else?
They also tested a method called IMBERT,
Okay.
which focuses on, identifying those trigger words specifically.
Right.
Again, not foolproof.
Right.
A clever attacker could find ways to bypass these defenses.
So it's kind of like we've built these incredibly powerful AI tools
Yeah.
that can generate human quality text, sometimes better than humans,
Right.
but we hadn't quite figured out how to secure them yet.
Yeah, it's still the, early days, I guess.
Early days, wild west of AI.
Wild West, yeah.
It's a little unnerving, to say the least.
It is, yeah, it's a real wake-up call. We're becoming increasingly reliant on these models for everything,
Oh, absolutely. Everything.
from news summaries and social media feeds
Mm.
to generating code and translating languages.
Right, absolutely.
Yet, their security is still playing catch-up.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners? What should they keep in mind, especially given how prevalent these models are becoming?
I think don't take anything at face value,
Okay.
especially when it comes to AI-generated content.
Okay.
Just be aware of the potential for, bias,
Mhm.
for subtle manipulation, even for outright fabrication.
Don't trust, verify.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this research only scratches the surface of the problem.
Okay.
One thing it didn't even get into is how these attacks could be scaled up. Imagine if the trigger wasn't just a single poison sample,
Right.
but a pattern spread across multiple data sets,
Oh, wow.
all feeding into the same AI.
Okay, now that's a thought that'll keep me up at night.
Yeah.
The potential for large-scale manipulation is a terrifying thought.
It's a whole new world of vulnerabilities that we're just
Sure.
starting to understand,
Yeah, well, on that cheery note, I think I need to go double-check my news sources, make sure I'm not being poisoned.
There you go.
Thanks for the fascinating, if slightly terrifying, deep dive.
Happy to be here. Anytime.